And welcome to Revolution Gathering. Good morning, good morning. I think I've started a few minutes early, so I'll give everybody a few minutes to get here, but welcome to Revolution Gathering. December 1st, holy smokes. End of the year. I can't believe December's here. My birthday is on December 18th, and I will be turning, shocker, 49 years old. Oh my goodness. So that is a lot to take in. Um, Not really. I seem to be more comfortable with myself the older I get, so that's a bit helpful. Want to welcome everybody here today. Some great things are happening. So next week, I may pre-record the talk because I will be speaking here in Seattle, live, in person. Jay Baker will be speaking at the Emerald City Metropolitan Community Church at 11:30 a.m. I will post. I've already posted some posters up, but I will post posters in the main areas later today, this week, so folks can know where to go. If you're in the Seattle area and would like to come see me speak, and you go, well, Jay, I'm not in the Seattle area, but I'd still like to come see you speak. You can go to the Emerald City MCC Facebook page, and they will be showing the talk live at 11:30 a.m. next Sunday, December 8th. So I will be live in Seattle. I haven't done a live speaking engagement where it was just me speaking. I did an interview not too long ago with an analyst in front of a group, but this is my first speaking gig in a long time. Always a passion of mine. I love to be speaking. I like to go on the road. I like to meet new people. So I'm really excited to be able to do this. The pastor is Brian, and I have gotten to know him over the past year here in Seattle, and we've just become really great friends. And I am honored and excited, especially at an MCC church. MCC, holds such a special place in my life. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Metropolitan Community Church, they were the first open and affirming LGBTQ ministry, church, denomination. Their churches were burnt down and protested against, and they went through the AIDS epidemic. I believe they started in the 60s. And as you may know, our good friend Steve, who was a big part of my life and Revolution's life, and was also interviewed by my mother when he came out saying he had AIDS, but he was also an LGBTQ pastor back on the PTL club in like '85. Steve was a pastor for MCC, so it's always played a really vital role in my life. And it's the interesting thing for me about MCC is it's one of the most affirming denominations I ever met. And when I say that, I don't mean LGBTQ. I mean just humanity, affirming humanity. They've just really a place where I've always felt like I could go and be myself and have interesting conversations. And I felt comfortable. I spoke at one of their big conferences one year and got to meet people from all over the country and world who were part of the MCC. And, they were truly inclusive, truly loving, truly graceful. And so, anyway, always glad to work with the MCC and be a part of what they're doing. So that will be next Sunday, December 8th. So it'd be nice to have a gig again. So this talk was inspired a few weeks ago when I was working on my last week's talk. I kind of had two different ideas come to me, and this was the second one. But really, this talk started long before that. This idea of this talk probably started when I was a teenager in the '90s. And we're going to be talking about our brother Malcom X today. When I first, I think when I first heard of Malcolm X, it was probably through Public Enemy. I've always been a huge hip hop fan, and sometimes I wear a Public Enemy necklace. I don't have it on right now, but like I was really into it. Like I was like the white kid wearing the leather African bracelets. I mean necklaces and stuff. I was keeping it real. But here then and then then there became the like Malcolm X hats everywhere. Everybody was wearing X and things like that. And when I would move to Atlanta, Georgia, and I would go to the South DeKalb Mall. If anybody knows that area, mostly a black area, and I would always go over there and look at the Kangol at the mall over there. But I would remember seeing these posters and these T-shirts of Malcolm X, and they would always say, "By any means necessary," and he would be holding a machine gun, and so I knew like those were the things that I was starting to know about Malcolm X, and I would ask, "Oh, he was, he was a leader," and the denomination, what was it called? He was a part of the Nation of Islam. Was very big in Atlanta, Georgia. Like they would often send, they had a newspaper that they would pass out on the streets, and they would sell bean pies on the streets and things like that. But what I came quick to learn about Nation of Islam is that they felt like white people were not good people. Not much has changed these days. But we'd find out that the white man was the devil and was seen as the devil. And so that put me in an odd place because I was a white guy. But I was still intrigued by these always well-dressed men and women and what they were doing. And I knew a little bit about Louis Farrakhan, but I still didn't know that much about Malcolm X, except that he was this very strong image of a leader. Years later, maybe not that far later, but I would see a film that became probably one of my top 5 films ever by Spike Lee was Malcolm X film. And it changed my life. I mean, it moved me so deeply to see the story of such an amazing icon and leader and where he came from. And it was very close to like things you'd seen in the evangelical church, people who go through prison, they get their life together and become this great leader. And but what I want to talk about today is his visit to Mecca. And I think it's valuably important for us to look at this and this story. And it was one of those things that just kind of blew me away when I saw it in the film, and got me to dive into Brother Malcolm X's life even more. And so today I'm going to share a little bit about Malcolm X and his autobiography and his experience at Mecca. Muslims, especially Orthodox Muslims, people who are part of Islam, will often take a pilgrimage. If they can, if they are able to, part of their faith is to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, and it's kind of their holy spot. And so that is where we're going to look at Malcolm X's life today. And I'm excited about it because it's even much deeper than the film. I had a few different ideas for the title. I'll have to send them to Brian, not to Brian, to Josh. A chronology of change. By the time I get to Mecca, a miracle on the way to Mecca, a pilgrimage. Anyway, those are all different ideas. But there was a time where Malcolm was seen as a separatist. And by separatist, he felt that, and I think I mentioned this last week when we did our talk, when I did my talk last week. But a separatist, is someone who says, for him, he felt like Black Americans, African Americans, should be separate from white Americans. And not that kind of Jim Crow separate but equal type of thing, but like black folks should have their own city, white folks should have their own city. You know, it's just not working. That's not happening. And, you know, a lot of folks from the Nation of Islam would say quite clearly that the devil walks among us and the devil is the white man. At one point, Malcom X called Dr. King an Uncle Tom and an instrument of the devil, an instrument of the white man. So you could see where I would disagree with that, being, you know, such a follower of Dr. King. But he had his falling out with the Nation of Islam and went and started his own ministry and his own movement. But he decided to go to Mecca before that. And I'm going to read a little bit about what he said. This is a great book. His autobiography is a really great book because it's a conversation he had with this guy, Alex Haley. And it's word for word Malcolm just speaking to him. And it's really great. So automatically when Malcolm X heads to Mecca, he starts to he goes to the airport, get on the airplane, and starts meeting with Arabian people, Middle Eastern people, North African Muslims. And they all said to him, they had said to me that my white indicing statements of notwithstanding, they felt that I was sincere in considering myself a Muslim. They felt if I was exposed to what always called the true Islam, I would understand it and embrace it. And so he starts to play with these ideas, even to the point where he's talking to the Prophet Elijah Muhammad's son, and his name was Wallace Muhammad, introduced him to more of the traditional Islam. But one of the things he says, I had resistance the impulse to drop by the FIA building in Brownstone at a Riverside Drive. Then one day, Dr. Schwab and I were introduced by a newspaper. He was cordial. Now, this is an Orthodox Muslim man. He said he had followed me in the press. I said I had been told of him. And we walked for 15 or 20 minutes. We both had to leave to make appointments we had. And when he dropped on me something whose logic never would get out of my head, he said to me, "No man has believed perfectly until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself." And, you know, for those of us who follow Christianity, I mean, this is loving your enemy as yourself. This is loving your neighbor as yourself type of thing. And so he says, this is the thing. This was just a logic that I couldn't get out of my head, that no man has believed perfectly until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. So he starts the trek, the pilgrimage to Mecca. And one of the things he notices right away is when he gets on the plane. And he writes, "Packed on the plane were white, black, brown, red, and yellow people, blue eyes and blonde hair, and my kinky red hair, all together brothers, all honoring the same God Allah, all in turn giving equal honor to each other." And for him, this was something new. You know, he was seeing these blue-eyed white folks on the same plane with him, literally and metaphysically. And so he was there. He goes on to say, "Each of them embraced me as though I were a long-lost child. I'd never seen these men before in my life, and they treated me so good. I'm going to tell you that I had never been honored in my life, nor had I ever received such true hospitality." And so here at Revolution, we talk a lot about loving your neighbor as yourself, being kind to those, disagreeing well, having hard conversations, and all this type of thing. Maybe one of the things we don't focus on enough, too, is hospitality. But I'll be honest with you, I get such pushback from arguing well and disagreeing well and, just sitting in a coffee shop. I don't know how we move from being reluctant to those ideas to saying that we need to show great hospitality, that we need to show great love, that we need to show great selflessness. We need to be the gracious host, if you will, loving without an agenda. And you may have heard that type of thing when we start to when people start to deconstruct and do stuff like, I'm going to go out and love people without an agenda. But they aren't often thinking about their enemies. They aren't often thinking about the people who loved them with an agenda. They're not thinking that I need to return love without an agenda towards those folks. Forgive the beeping. That was my washing machine doing dishes. But so often we have to become selfless within our own work, within our own grace, within our own love. Like, are we just wanting to trade one dogma for another? Or are we wanting to really live a life of change? A chronology of change, as Malcom X said about his life. Are we really wanting to just change one bad group for another bad group? Or do we want to grow? Do we want to evolve? Do we want to find ourselves something better? Because I think often we think we've found something better when we find our group or our tribe or our community. But the problem, like we've said before, and I've referenced this year, as we talked about when we were talking about Todd McGowan's book, is that often the community is based also on who's not allowed in, who's out, who's on the outside. And the only really way to have a true public experience is to almost be the stranger, or go to the park, or sit on the bus, or do something like that where we're all together, where we're all the individual. And so, this type of idea of loving without an agenda and selflessness, and returning to a place of those who've caused you pain and seeing something differently is very unique. The reason that Malcom X is one of my heroes is for the fact that he was able to experience such radical change in his heart and not go, I have to stay where I'm stuck. I have to have, this has to be, now it wasn't like, miraculous, we're all going to hold hands and sing, Kumbaya. It's not that idea, but that he was willing to look at things differently. I will continue. He says here, nothing in either of my two careers as a black man in America had served to give me any idealistic tendencies of my instincts. Automatically examined the reasons and the motives of anyone who did anything they didn't have to do for me. Always in my life, it was any white person I could see a selfish motive. But there in the hotel, now this is, I've skipped a little bit of this. Is one of the things that was interesting is when he gets to Mecca, when he gets to the he gets to the airport, and he automatically gets flagged, and pretty much spends like 2.5 days in the airport, like waiting to see a judge. And luckily he had a connection of someone, and he finally reaches out to them and is able to leave the airport and make his pilgrimage. But he was stuck at the airport, where he also had these great experiences with his fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, and seeing the importance of prayer and meal sharing and all this type of stuff. And he just said he felt like a Martian. He felt like he was out on another planet. He said, but there in the hotel that morning, a telephone call a few hours away from the cot on the 4th floor tier of the dormitory was one of the few times I had been aware that I was totally without resistance. That a white man, at least he would have been considered white in America, related to an Arab's ruler, to whom was a closer advisor to truly an international man. So nothing in the world to gain. The point. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I skipped something, and I'm trying not to do that. So this man that he calls upon, he realizes is a white European man. And he's like, what's this? And he's also related to royalty. So he goes, that white man, at least he would have been considered white in America, related to Arabs, an Arab ruler to whom he was a close advisor, truly an international man. With nothing in the world to gain, had given up his suit to me, because he didn't have clothes. We gave him a suit. For my transient comfort. He had nothing to gain. He didn't need me. He had everything. In fact, he had more to lose than gain by being my friend. This would have lasting effect on history, on civil rights history, and on that movement, on Malcolm X, on his disagreements with Dr. King. You know, I mean, like something revolutionary was happening, and it was happening because someone shows Malcolm love. Someone shows him grace. Someone shows him hospitality with nothing they expected. Matter of fact, to the point, showing him such hospitality that he goes, you know, they actually have more to lose than to gain for being my friend. And I don't think we realize the power that that type of hospitality, of that type of grace, of that type of selflessness has on people. You know, people often, I did an interview not too long ago, and people were asking me about my dad and being so conservative and how to touch and all this stuff, saying all this stuff to me. And one of the things that came to my mind was like, you know, that's all great and everything. I get it. I don't agree with a lot of his theology, probably most of it. But he did teach me a lot about forgiveness and grace. But then I think about, like, I watched him spend almost 5 years in prison, and I didn't see a lot of people come visit him, except for in that last year, someone came to visit him quite a bit, and that person was Franklin Graham, someone who also I completely don't agree with in their form of Christianity. But that was the person who showed hospitality. That was the person who showed love, and that person showed grace. So when I wonder often why my dad went in that direction, it's often because some people, evangelicals, white evangelical conservatives, might be better at showing hospitality, at showing grace, at least to their own, of showing selflessness and putting their own image at risk to help someone out. That's a tough lesson. That's a hard thing to hear. I know. But in my mind, I'm going like, well, where were all the progressive pastors? Where were all the left? No, I didn't see any Lutheran ministers coming to say, hey, we'll help you get out of prison and set up a place to live and help you get your life together. And, you know, we'll come visit you and see you. And any pastor could have come visited my dad. When you're a pastor, you can visit a person in prison no matter what. You can even go sometimes on non-visiting days as a pastor. So, and most know that, but most did not go to see my father. So that's often something to think about is what happens when we just go, well, that's not my problem. Restoration's not my issue. I don't want to love that person because it could make me dirty. I don't want to love that person because they have a bad reputation. You know, if I'm put in with them, people will think I'm racist. Or if I'm put in with them, people will think I'm, you know, questionable. You know, and what Malcolm X is experiencing here is someone who had nothing to gain and more to lose, showing him love. He said, he had followed the American press about me. Malcolm X says, if he did that, he knew there was only stigma attached to me. I was supposed to have horns. I was a racist. I was anti-white. And he, from all appearances, was white. I was supposed to be a criminal. Not only that, but everyone is even accusing me of using his religion of Islam as a cloak for my own criminal practices and philosophies. Even if he had some motive to use me, he knew that I was separated from Elijah Muhammad and that the Nation of Islam, my power base. According to the press in America, the only organization that I had was just a few weeks old. I had no job. I had no money. Just to get over there, I had to borrow money from my sister. So this is the place where Malcolm X is at. And grateful that his brothers and sisters in Islam reached out to him in this way. And so I don't think we realize the powerful effect we can have on very strong, very influential, very powerful people by loving them in their lowest times, rather than saying, oh, they got what they deserved. Oh, they don't deserve that. Oh, they're bad. Oh, they're this. I don't want to, we often just judge, judge, judge. And then when we see people fail that we don't like, we dance on their graves rather than running out to say, what can we do to help you? What did Paul the Apostle say? If you think you're too good to restore someone, you're only fooling yourself and you're really a nobody when you don't do that. When James says, faith without works is dead, what he says is if you go and you pass someone who's suffering, who's hungry, and who's thirsty, and is naked, and you go, stay warm, eat well, ta-ta, your faith is dead to them. These folks' faith, even though it's a completely different faith, was very alive and well to Brother Malcom X. That morning, when I was first began to reappraise the white man, he goes, that morning was when I first began to reappraise the white man. It was when I first began to when I first began to perceive that the white man, as commonly used, means complexion only secondary. Primarily, it described an attitude and an action in America. And to think about that, that's kind of an attitude and things that a lot of us carry today, even us liberal thinking progressive people, oh, the white man, And even that's a facade in a lot of ways. The highest number of suicide rates in the United States is men, especially white men, between 40 and 50, and they're taking their own lives in extremely high numbers. They've become disillusioned with their lives, with any hope or anything, and have completely given up. Poverty sees no race. We're all in this together. I mean, there are more poor, just by the numbers, that there's more whites than other people, but there are more poor white people than anything. The point being is I'm not trying to defend the whites. What I'm trying to say is that we have to take a sobering look, a reality. We have to really practice critical thinking. I had somebody today be like, you need to practice critical thinking. Well, that's critical thinking. It's not easy thinking. It's not binary thinking. It's not scapegoat thinking. It's not saying, well, we just got to get rid of the white evangelicals. Someone has said that to me recently. It's like, oh, it's just, we're going to have to deal with all these white evangelicals for the next 4 years. And I said, okay, well, but, when I saw my family go through things, it wasn't just white evangelicals. It seemed like a lot of different evangelicals. It also seemed like a lot of progressives. But I also said, like, when my friend Carlton Pearson lost everything, it was black evangelicals and Asian evangelicals and white, all colored people coming together. So we often want to just focus a group and say, well, this will be the group that's the enemy. We'll make these people bad and we'll just make a lot of assumptions out of this rather than seeing humanity. And what was happening with Malcom X here is he's seeing something different. Now, is it solving all the problems in America? No, but it's broadening his horizons and he's seeing the world and he's seeing humanity in a different way. And I can't begin to explain to you how tough this must be for him. When you've stood on something so firmly and it's been such a part of your work and your life, to radically say, hey, I was wrong. I misread this. I have a limited perspective. My perspective has been opened wide. Is quite impressive. And again, one of the reasons why I think Malcom X is such an amazing leader. He goes, but in the Muslim world, I had seen that men with white complexions were more generously brotherly than anyone else had ever been. That morning was the start of a radical alteration in my whole outlook about white men. I'm going to jump through this so we can get there, and I've got a little talk. But one of the things is when we go through Galatians every year, I talk about this, the verse in Galatians. I try to stay out of Galatians, guys, but I just can't do it. Here we go. Galatians 3, where it says 3:28, there is no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free, there is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. Now, it doesn't say there is Jew and Greek, there is slave and free, there is male and female, for all of you are one. No, it does it in a negative term with a identity, and it completely clears the identity. It says you're all one in Christ. You're not Jew, you're not Gentile, you're not white, you're not black, you're not straight, you're not gay, you're all one in Christ. Now, this is not something that we like to hear. It's not a very popular message. It's not a very popular concept to say no to identity politics. But this is what's happening here. And why I say this is not so we can make certain groups look better and certain groups look different, but that so we can practice this selflessness that we're seeing, that we can practice this being the gracious host and loving, loving without an agenda with each other, where we won't scapegoat one another, where we don't judge based on one's appearance or religion or sexuality, where we're able to experience something beyond that. But that requires quite a bit of growth. It requires time, it requires patience, and as I've said a million times before, it's progress, not perfection. And I think at a less point, a lot of people don't want to hear this type of thing. I've been posting Dr. King quotes on my around and on Facebook. I keep getting pushback from people. I keep getting, well, that could mean that, and they start reading into these quotes from Dr. King. Like one of them was what he was talking about Vietnam, and they're reading like, well, what about, January 6th or February, whenever the all that happened, and then a president who doesn't want to, they just automatically, they read in the worst case scenario into a quote from Dr. King about being nonviolent. But now they've made it about like, well, these people were doing this, so it's bad. It's like we sometimes hold on to such hurt and such pain that we can't see the forest for the trees. We can't see a future. It just blinds us. The rage and the anger and the hurt and the pain, it just blinds us from being able to see anything further. That we can't even we can't consider the source of like, oh, well, this was something written by Dr. King. Oh, this was something written about being a peaceful person, and showing grace. It's it doesn't. I want to say something really quick about bitterness. About bitterness and giving up. I really think that it's contagious. And I think it's maybe more contagious than hope. I think bitterness, anger, and giving up is extremely contagious. And we see it so much in the United States today. And we see it through so many people. And it doesn't seem to care if what color you are, what your sexuality is, or what denomination you are, or what party you. It seems like the media, though, plays a very good part in that of getting us angry and getting us fearful, and we all get bitter and angry, and it becomes more contagious than hospitality. It becomes more contagious than love. It becomes more contagious than being selflessness, because those things cause us to have to die to ourselves and have to look further. It's almost when I was growing up, it was like you have to take the narrow road and the wide road, and I thought the wide road was like full of like rated R movies and cigarettes and pretty girls, and the narrow road was DC talk and sobriety and no fun. That's what they made me think. But what I realized is that the wide road is full of bitterness and anger and scapegoating and selfishness and bitterness, and that narrow road is full of hospitality and love and selflessness and being the gracious host and loving without an agenda. The wide road loves with an agenda. Loves, what can I get from you? What can I get from you? What can I get from you? And suck you dry and then move on to the next person. That's the wide road. And we don't see it because religion, for a lot of us in our times, in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, seemed to confuse those things with each other and tried to focus on making things sins in plural rather than seeing sin as separation. And I think we missed the mark there. Anyway, so I just say, like, beware of bitterness. And if you are feeling bitterness, maybe beware of how it is something that can spread like wildfire. And I don't think that, I think bitterness can be important. I think bitterness can lead us to constructive thinking and to a positive type of rebellion that wants to help people more and to take unjust things and make it justice, speaking truth to power. But there's also a time when that bitterness can just rot us and rot other people, and then we can have a whole group just based on bitterness. I've seen it so many times, like Facebook groups just of all bitter people. Just who do we tear down next? Who's our next enemy? To the point that when they run out of enemies, they turn on themselves. Malcom X says, I couldn't say in my mind, he's quoting from his notebook. He took notes. I couldn't say in my mind that these were white men. Why? The men acted as if they were brothers of mine. The elder, Dr. Azam, as if he were my father. His fatherly, scholarly speech. I felt like he was my father. He was, you could tell, a highly skilled diplomat with broad range mind. His knowledge was so worldly. He was current on the world affairs, and some people are what is going on in their living rooms. He was moved to the point where he saw this white person, this man, and he felt like a fatherly figure. I don't know what to do. This love is making me incapable of scapegoating him by the color of his skin. His love is undoing hundreds of years of history that I've experienced, and not undoing it, but it's changing how I see it and how and my whole life, how I've been treated by white people as lesser than, as a second-class citizen. And it was true. I mean, today I think is the 64th anniversary of the bus boycotts. So he was treated horribly. White people were treating black people horribly in the South, especially in the South, but even in the North as well. Sometimes Dr. King said the North seemed to make the South look tame. But this perspective, gaining out of his area of expertise, said, oh, I've made a generalization. I've made a sweeping judgment. And now I don't know what to do. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful that he shares in this with us, He said he spoke of the radical lineage of the descendants of Muhammad, the prophet, and he showed how they were both black and white. He also pointed out how color, the complexities of color, and the problems of color which exist in the Muslim world exist only where and to the extent that the area of Muslim's world has been influenced by the West. So there is the truth. He's saying the West, a lot of Americans, seem to be obsessed with color. And racism comes in with that happens. Racism comes. So when we become obsessed on identity, a lot of times a lot of us are trying to celebrate identity. But we also see a lot of people who become obsessed with the identity and they have to tear it down. And then when we get into the identity of saying, well, I'm a this and not that, in that binary kind of thought sense, all of a sudden, we've created a binary thinking of, well, I can't be with you because you said you're this, and I can't be this because I said this, and then we forget each other's humanity. When they asked him about what had impressed him the most so far, he said, the brotherhood, the people of all races, colors, from all over the world coming together as one. It has provided to me it has proved to me the power of one God. Now, of course, as Christians, we'll think, well, I don't know about that. And we'll also say, well, what about women? Oh, and what about LGBTQ people? But we're not there in this book. We're not there. We're here. This is mid-60s, probably 64, I think this is happening. But this is the beginning of a change, of a radical change, of inclusion. An inclusion that's happening because he sees things differently. because he sees people sharing meals together. He sees people at the same table. We often say, well, I can't sit at the same table. What he's saying is, I just saw people at the same table and it changed me. And then I saw some of those people show me hospitality and show me kindness and show me love. Now, some of you are probably thinking right now, well, yeah, well, when are those people going to show hospitality and love? Well, if you're thinking that, then you've missed it. You've missed it. Remember, what did it say right at the beginning of this chapter? That's our job, isn't. He said that this comment had stuck with him. He said that no man has believed perfectly until they wishes for his brother what he wishes for themselves. So what he's saying is I saw this and now I have to return it. It's not saying, well, when are they going to do it? It's saying, when am I going to do it? When are we going to start to do this? When are we going to start to show this type of love and this hospitality? When are we going to be the nuances that we often speak of and hear about? He said, I could tell them the impact of this upon them. I could tell them the impact. They had been aware of the plight of the black man in America was bad, but they had not even been aware it was, and they had not been aware that it was inhuman and that it was psychological castration. So he is clear that it was suffering. It was horrible. Because I was using a measure. Because and everything I said to them, as long as we talked, they were aware of the yardstick that I was using to measure everything. That to me, the earth's most explosive and pernicious evil is racism, the inability of God's creation to live as one, especially in the Western world. But he's going here from being a separatist to going, I was a racist. I've been a racist. I've been affected by racism and I've given in to racism. And now what I'm realizing is that the problem is that it's the oneness. And now I also have to practice that oneness. You know, before this, he would never work with anyone white. And now he didn't go back and, like I said, and kumbaya, because he came back and he was still very hurt, as rightfully so. Seeing the things the way he saw was rightfully, I can't criticize him for thinking the way he thought. I can't do it. I mean, I understand what it's like to feel like a group of people hate you and don't want anything to do with you, to feel anger and feel bitter. I don't blame him. For me, the miracle is what's happening here with the showing of love and grace and hope that he's receiving from these strangers that look like the enemy to him. And it's causing him to go like, maybe separation isn't the answer. And he talks about this later in a letter he wrote, and he said, you know, I don't know if I can have hope for white Westerners all together in America, but I can have hope for the younger generation, which now is the older generation, which a lot of people have now rolled their eyes about. But he was saying, I can have hope for them because they seem to be honestly curious about my work and wanting to work with me, and I've denied them in the past, but now maybe those are the folks I need to open and embrace. Unfortunately, Malcom X's life did not go on long after this. I just imagine what it would have been like to see him and Dr. King be able to work together. And this is one thing that I find to be extremely beautiful and extremely difficult and extremely un-PC, folks. So buckle up or unfollow or like and subscribe, whatever. You're going to get something out of it. Likes and subscribes helps a lot, by the way. I reflected since that the letter I finally sat down to compose had been subconsciously shaping itself in my mind. The color blindness of the Muslim world's religious society and the color blindness of the Muslim world's human society. These two influences had each day been making great impact and increasing the persuasion against my previous way of thinking. Now, often when we hear people saying in the West, oh, I'm colorblind, people, oh, no, we don't want you to be colorblind. Don't be colorblind. But what he's saying here is that he experienced something that felt like color blindness, that was their color blindness by people here who didn't seem color, didn't seem to judge by race, didn't seem to judge by this, but just seemed to be in one, impacted his life. That their color blindness made an impact. So remember, next time you hear someone say that, you can think to yourself just quietly. I wouldn't say it out loud because it's probably an argument. When someone's like, oh, we don't like colorblind. You're going to well, it did something for Malcolm X. It did something for probably one of our greatest leaders of the 20th century. Some people may argue that. I don't know. But to me, he's had a huge influence on my life and impact on my life. And why I'm able to speak of things like this, because, I guess that sometimes as you say this, and I have people like Malcolm X in my mind, but I don't say it. And so I felt like this is why it needs to be talked about and said, is like, this stuff really does work. And we're running into a time in our culture where we're all so divided. And I keep saying argue well, disagree well. Now I'm going to say show hospitality and love and selflessness and be a gracious host and love without an agenda. All those things I think should be built into the disagreeing well and arguing well. Be careful not of spreading bitterness and giving up to all sorts of people, because know that it's contagious. But it comes from seeing and hearing my heroes experience these things firsthand. Great leaders who probably had more to lose by saying, I'm coming back, and what you know me as is not what you know me as anymore. Not only did I have to borrow money to go to Mecca, now I'm coming back, and my thinking has changed. I've grown. He said, I have been blessed by Allah with a new insight into the true religion of Islam and a better understanding of America's entire racial dilemma. It wasn't a problem that had solved by his trip to Mecca, but it was a problem that now has changed, and his work has now changed, and being inclusive and not scapegoating people has changed, even scapegoating people that have been horrible to him and given him the evidence for him to order to scapegoat them. In some ways you could just say he judged probably correctly most of the time. But now he's going, the judgment has to be less harsh. The message has to change. And this is from Islam, a religion that we've been told to be, it's frightening, and it's scary, and it's full of terrorists. And this is where he's finding that. So there's so many levels and layers to what's happening to this moment of repentance, this moment of change in Malcolm X's life that we can learn from and grasp from. And we can take part of this and realize that, we can change. People can change. We might think our hurt's too great, but do you think our hurt, and you say, well, Jay, you don't understand as a white, heterosexual, straight, cis, male, all that stuff. Well, I think people like Dr. King understood, and that's why I use Dr. King. And I think people like Malcolm X understood. Watch the film. Watch the film of his life. These people understood and were able to make that change. So you don't have to believe me. There's a reason why I have, John Hume, a Catholic, politician, and Martin Luther King, a Baptist minister, Malcolm X, a Muslim, Bayard Rustin, a gay man who learned from Gandhi about nonviolence. There's a reason why these people stick in my life and are my heroes. Tammy Faye, who was made the joke of and made fun of every night on television, even before she hit her scandal, who still decided, I'm going to stick with love, I'm going to stick with grace, I'm going to stick with forgiveness, I'm going to stick with, you want to talk about hospitality. My mom loves people so much. Just this Thanksgiving, I was thinking about, I ended up watching Christmas trees because I didn't have anywhere to be, so I volunteered to watch the Christmas trees on Thanksgiving. But I was thinking about the times that my friend Chuck, and he would always have a girlfriend with him and all these people. And, Chuck was a Satanist. I mean, he had pentagrams on his elbows and crazy stuff. Always wore these funny, crazy devil t-shirts. And always gave pictures like this. We have a picture of me where I'm pointing up, and neither one of us knew we were doing it. I'm pointing up, and he's pointing down. On his gravestone, he passed away a couple years ago. No gods, no masters. But he's also was buried with a picture of, he was cremated but buried also with a picture of him and my mom and me together in a Revolution shirt. And my mom always showed him that hospitality, and she'd go, come here, my other son, come here, I love you, I care about you. This is radical hospitality. Had he not known her, she would have been a joke. So something radical happens when those two different people come together. Something radical happens when the white man opens up his doors and says, Malcom X, I want to serve you. I want to love you. I want to take care of you. You are deserving of love and grace. Brother Malcolm goes on to say, I know that when my letter became public knowledge back in America, because he's writing this letter to get ready to tell everybody what's going on. And one of the great things I love about this too is the first person he told was he wrote a letter to his wife. He's like, I had to get my wife on board. I knew she would be, but I wanted to let her know first. And I don't know why. I think I'm an old romantic at heart. He goes, I knew that when my letter became public knowledge back in America, many would be astounded, loved ones, friends, and enemies alike. And no less astonished would be millions whom I did not know, who had gained during my 12 years with Elijah Muhammad, a hate image of Malcom X. Even I myself was astonished. But there was a precedence in my life for this letter. My whole life had been a chronology of change. He goes on to say, in the same ritual, displacing a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experience in America had led me to believe never could exist between the white and the non-white. He's saying this display of unity, the spirit, he just felt like it could never have happened. Despite a firm conviction, I have been always a man who tries to, listen to this, because he did have a firm conviction. If you ever listened, his speeches even before this were just incredible. It made me not want to be white. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, F white people. Despite my firm convictions, I have been always a man who tries to face facts. And this is what I want to say to all of us here listening right now. If you're on the podcast, if you're on the YouTube live right now, wherever you're at, he goes, despite my firm convictions, and I'm talking to you all with your firm convictions, and you should share this with people who also have these unshakable firm convictions. Let's make this type of thing contagious. Let's make this contagious. Let's not make bitterness and giving up contagious. Let's make this type of hope contagious, because there's very little. I do want to give up every day, folks. I do want to give up sometimes. Spending a holiday by yourself does weird things to your head. You can, some people like it. For me, it's just like, what's happening? Life is really difficult right now. And I have so many people, like I said before, like when I quote these incredible human beings and they say, oh, but what about this? And what about January? And what about that? And it's just hopelessness. And I'm just going like holding on to because I'm a pessimist. I promise you I'm a pessimist. I'm a very dark human being. I live in a very dark place. And I don't have a lot of hope, but the Bible talks about faith the size of a mustard seed, and my mom used to say that, so I kind of hang on to this little bit of hope. You might think I'm an optimist, but I promise you I'm not. Like Cornel West, I'm just a prisoner of hope, but I am a pessimist. And I hold on to this, but I feel like it's always something that people are trying to grab. Especially my progressive liberal brothers and sisters are always trying to grab out and just put that down. You got to be more angry. You've got to be more, you can't bring people to, who are you, do this. And it's just trying to take away any hope I have, Let's not be those folks anymore. Because he says here, despite my firm conviction, and we are talking about Malcom X, folks, I have been always a man who tries to face facts and to accept the reality of life as a new experience, a new knowledge unfolds in it. I've always kept an open mind. We say we're open-minded, but how open-minded are we to showing this type of thing to someone who might think differently of us? That someone might be racist against us or think, oh, I don't recognize your right to be. What happens when we do? This is what can happen. I kept an open mind, which is necessary to the flexibility that must go hand in hand with every form of intelligent search for truth. They cut it in half. Must go hand in hand with every intelligent search for truth. You must keep an open mind. You must be flexible and open to new things, open to a bigger world, open to a new job, open to a new calling, open to saying, well, I had a limited knowledge and now I have better knowledge and now I'm more inclusive. Now I'm going to have a dinner at my house for the pastor that kicked me out. I don't know, just giving you an example. My parents used to do that, and it used to drive me crazy. I'm not going to lie to you. When I was a teenager, my parents would have friends that I knew had turned on me. One person who had even witnessed against my dad in his case where he went to prison, and had this big dinner, and they're laughing, having a great time, sharing drinks, telling stories, remembering the good old days. And in my mind, I'm sitting there and I'm like the angry kid at the table, slowly saying little bitter thing. Oh, I know some of you did. Oh, it is. I'm like still pissed because I'm like 11, 12, 13. No, that was even before prison. No, after prison. Yeah. He did it before prison and after prison. But there were times when I was a teenager, I was even more mad. And then times just even after it was all happening and people had gone to the press and things like that and said horrible things on TV, and he would still have them over his home, my mom and dad, and they would love these people. And I would just be like doing my best to hold my tongue and usually not doing it very well, to the point where my dad was like, why don't you just go upstairs and read a comic book or play video games or something? Because I couldn't grasp this. I couldn't grasp loving your enemies. I couldn't grasp loving people that I've always thought were supposed to, now, not even always thought, but that recently thought were enemies and bad people. I just had good and bad. But that's not growing. That's not being flexible. It took years to become flexible and grow that way. He goes on to say, we were truly all the same, brothers, because their belief in one God had removed the white from their minds, the white from their behavior, and the white from their attitude, which, he means in the word that he would use that. I could see from this that perhaps if white Americans could accept the oneness of God, then perhaps they too could accept the reality, the oneness of man, and cease to measure and hinder and harm others in the terms of their differences in color. Now, just to hit you this part of his letter here, he goes, the American Negro can never be blamed for his racial animosity. And I agree. He is only reacting to 400 years of the conscious racism of the American white. But as racism leads America up the suicide path, I do believe from my experience that I have had within them and the whites of the younger generation in the college and the universities, we will see the handwriting on the wall, and many of them will turn to the spiritual path of truth. The only way left to America is towards off the disaster of that racism inevitably must lead to. So he's gone from saying, even being a self-proclaimed racist at one point, to saying the only way left to America is to ward off the disaster that racism inevitably must lead. The separatist is no longer the separatist. Malcom X has hope. He says some people seemed colorblind to him and made a huge difference. People showed him hospitality, loveness, selflessness. We never can know the power of our own kindness. We can never know the power of showing hospitality. And you hear, Jay, well, why? You seem to look back a lot. You seem to look back on these men. And you've probably heard that one of the quote. You've seen it probably in different ways. It says, those who don't know history are bound to repeat its mistakes. So I wrote underneath that, thus, those who do know history are bound to repeat its victories. And I don't mean war victories, but I mean when we see what happened to this moment with Dr. King, this moment of growth and intentionality, what we see in people like Gandhi and John Hume and great leaders like this. A lot I'm leaving out, but and you might say, well, what does Malcolm X learning about Orthodox Islam have to do with me? A Muslim, Jay. Well, truth is truth, my friends. Truth is truth. I would say humanity, when we're able to see humanity and choose it over all the other things that we see, all the different identifiers that we see and all the different terms that we come up with, when we're able to just see each other's humanity, I think something wonderful is possible. You know, and if you look at this, what does this have to do with the Bible? I mean, look at what happened. I mean, all of a sudden, the kind of the idea of being kind, praying for those who persecute you, being kind to those who, you know, talk bad about you. All of a sudden, you know, you go, oh, you know, it leads to great leaders becoming even greater, and even their vision to grow greater. And I will say that Malcolm X was not perfect, and a lot of his theology was not perfect, and ideas weren't perfect, but he was not perfect. None of us are, because we're all on a journey. We're all on like a life, a chronology of change, if you will. So I hope this reaches you guys today. I hope you like what you hear. I hope it gives you hope. I hope it encourages you more as we move into a future where people seem to be set on us being divided. And that we make the choice to say, no, we choose hospitality over bitterness. We choose love and selflessness and being a gracious host over giving up. We will do our best to love without an agenda, because love is what shapes and changes people. Love is the concept I've seen change more people. Relationships and love I've seen change more people than any amount of theology and philosophy. And I think we see it today in life of our brother Malcom X. Thank you all. As a reminder, hey, it's the end of the year. If you could help support Revolution, if you're looking to get that end of year tax write-off, that's the only thing we really can offer you for your donation. That and 3 free sins. I kid. But you can make a donation at Revolution by going to revolutionchurch.com. And it supports our work. It makes this work possible. Allows me to do this work. I'm also watching Christmas trees tomorrow. So my neighbor who's working on them right now, can come home, take a shower, and change. But yeah, we could use your support. Holidays are tough. I know they're tough on all of us. We much rather have you than your money. At the same point, I only got half a paycheck last year and barely made my rent. I would love to be able to make my rent this year and help my kids have a good Christmas. So if it is possible and you do have a little extra to support our work, fantastic. If not, that's okay too. If you're in the Seattle area, don't forget that I'll be speaking at Emerald City MCC next Sunday, December 8th, downtown. And if you want to watch it live, the Emerald City Metropolitan Community Church on Facebook. That's their thing. They will be showing that live at 11:30 on their Facebook page, so you can watch it there. Maybe we'll try to stream it as well. We'll try to do something and get it out there. But I'll definitely put links and stuff to it after it happens. But thank you for your love and your grace and your support. And I really hope that Malcolm X's experience encouraged you today and gave you hope today. And that we can become a community, or not even a community, just people of hope. I mean, we're reaching out. We're all in our own places right now, in our own area right now. We're all in our own home, dealing with our own shit. But somehow we still are able to come together and hopefully share hope and share tools and strengths to go and move forward in the future in a way that will make life a little bit less crazy for the world. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.